There we go. So it was almost like a LaGrange College reunion. People who had graduated, people who were political science majors, minors, or I had them for American experience. And I was amazed to see all the different things people were doing, how excited they were about their jobs, what they were able to do. Many of them pretty close to the fields that they liked, whether they were in political science or American experience. That was great to see. I recognized all of them except for one person. He didn't have class with me, but he was friends with several of the others. Just couldn't remember, but I know he was from LaGrange College, and he had a big old smile on his face too, so whatever he's up to, that's a good sign. I kept thinking, I wonder what it's going to be like, 10 years from now. I catch up with all of you, how things will be going. So start thinking ahead a little bit to that. And each of them, if you were at the presentation on Friday, just like Carl's story, not everyone had a smooth transition to where they wanted to go, but each of them stayed pretty persistent at what they wanted to do. Carl talked actually about when after he graduated from here, he went on to University of Maryland, which is one of the best writing schools in the country in terms of journalism. They're a top 10 political science program as well. And the first time he applied for his dream job, he did not get the job. He was like a second place person, but then a woman went on maternity leave, and so he did her job and did a really good job. And then, that job ended, she came back to work, but a short time after that, they called him back and said, you did a really good job, and the guy who finished #1 is not doing such a good job, so it's yours. And that's what he's been doing ever since. So he talked about making the transition from Washington, D.C. Over to Chicago. And I thought this was interesting. One of the last things he said to our students, he came here as a freshman on a Rotary scholarship to be here one semester. He said, I came from Norway, where college is free. To come to the United States, where you have to pay to go to college, he said, I've not regretted it one day of my life. I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't think he said just because I was in the audience. I think he really meant it. And he writes articles for Inside Higher Ed that, pretty much all of us are reading. His professors all across the country are going to him for information about what the future of college is. So it's kind of cool that one of our grads from 2011 is the one that we're going to, to find out more about our field. Every so often we think to look down at his byline and go, oh, we know that guy. So keep thinking about what you're going to do. Please, whatever you do not be bashful about asserting yourself when you graduate outside the market. We have a lot of good grads, do really well, jump in. There are a couple who do great stuff here, and I think they get really shy on the market. They just kind of hide away or disappear. Very rare that we have that, only a few cases. But, sometimes it takes a while. Either some of them, they aim the sights too high, pick one dream job and no others, and it didn't come through. Instead of finding another path to get there, they just kind of went into a shell. Others just had very little confidence in themselves. Please don't do that. You can do a lot of good stuff. Everyone in this room, just don't sell yourself short. That's all I can say. On that topic, as like I said, so be looking for that. That's something we can knock out definitely before Thanksgiving. And then all you've got is a December final exam. Now, I know most of you in this room have done pretty well. Even though you've done pretty well, sometimes this happens. I have a class that's doing pretty well, and they decide, okay, don't need to worry about this final near as much. I'm willing, if you can pick out time amongst yourselves to have a big old exam review, I would be happy to be at that exam review. One of my favorite moments at LaGrange College was I had a class of students for international politics. We had a Saturday morning exam from 8 till 11. It cut into one of my favorite running races at Auburn of the entire year. I hate missing that, and it's going to happen again this year. And so I was already bummed about that, but I thought, well, at least I have the faculty party to look forward to on Friday. And I got an email from the students. They said, Dr. Turris, can you please come by and do an exam review? Sure. What time do you want? We're all going to meet around 7 p.m. on Friday night. And I'm like, no. I had two things to look forward to in early December. One of them is my Saturday morning race. The other is the faculty get-together. And they scheduled it right in the middle of the faculty get-together. So after about an hour being there, I started taking off and was like, where are you going on Friday? Going back to campus. Why? Students called for an exam review. They just looked at me like I was insane. They're like, like any of your students are gonna show up. Like any of them are gonna like really be prepared or so. I took a chance. We were there for like 3 hours doing stuff. And Adam Roberts brought by donuts, Krispy Kreme donuts or so. Everybody had a good old time. We looked over stuff for the entire semester. Next morning, they took the exam. It was one of the highest average final exams ever. That totally made it worth missing both events. So don't schedule on Friday night, but if there's some time during finals, before you take this exam, that you want to schedule a review, I'll make the time. Sound good? Or as long as you don't schedule it like when I've got something where I have to be like den leader for Cub Scouts or something like that. Sound good? We'll negotiate the time. But let's do that again. I don't mind that. I would like this class to ace the final. But again, time to get through the material, what we need to know. And one of the most important things you need to know is what's known as the responsible party model. Now, a lot of these concepts I'm telling you, they've been developed over time. They've been around in political science for a long time. Political science was created around the early 1900s, but it didn't really start getting really going until after World War II. I think people realized that America could no longer focus on itself or just kind of kick politics to the side. They realized that politics could impact everyone's lives, whether you liked it or not. And so therefore, especially after World War II, colleges started offering political science. You had a lot of professors jumping into it. They started developing a lot of ideas, not just about foreign politics, but about domestic politics as well. How should things be done? And one of the most important theories we have about political parties is called the responsible party model. This actually comes from not one person, but a group of people, the American Political Science Association, or known as APSA. And they decided that since we're going to have elections, we may as well figure out, if we're going to have political parties, we may as well figure out what are the best practices. If you're in the real world, you'll come across this term called best practices model. All right, let's say, Ronald, you've got a IT startup. You want to build like the next software company, and you get your team together. What you might want to do is you might want to go over and say, well, what is everyone else doing? What are the people who are most successful in my field? What are they doing? It's called best practices. LaGrange College, whenever we want to look at something, we look at the schools that we aspire to be. People at our level, people slightly above our level, and we say, best practices. What are other people doing? Should we adopt it or not? And so responsible party model was sort of a best practices model for elections. So trust me, no matter what you go into, you'll probably come across best practices model. Anybody here a baseball fan? A couple of baseball fans? I actually saw an article today, and I apologize I didn't have time to download it, but I'll come back to it. It's a best practices model for how to succeed in any business based on what the Chicago Cubs learned. So, you'll see these. It may, even if it doesn't use the term best practices, that's what it is. So what political parties should do? They should develop and clarify alternate policy positions for voters. And this is sort of a pluralistic idea about political parties. There should be clear policy alternatives. People should have a real choice when it comes to election time, instead of like two versions of the same thing. They should also let people know what the issues are. Whenever they have campaign commercials, whenever they pass out campaign literature, it should be about what their policies are, what their stand is on the issues. They need to get candidates for office that agree with these issues, that agree with the party. You also need to get these folks elected. That's what political parties do. Political parties are designed to win office and hold office. That is the number one function of a political party. But responsible party means this is like a really good party. Once these folks are elected, you've got to hold them accountable. They've got to do what they said they were going to do. And then make sure that you've got party discipline. when it comes to Congress. Anybody know what this is loosely based on? Does this look familiar to anybody? Has anybody had comparative politics before? Does it seem familiar? Nobody? Not from comparative politics? A kind of governing system where you have strong party discipline, a strong party model, ideological rigidity. Nobody? Nobody ever come across this? Well, believe it or not, it actually comes from the British. It's more of like a parliamentary system. That's in fact where political parties came from. They came from the United Kingdom, Great Britain. This is where, and it was exported to America, right? You had Tories and you had Whigs. The Tories were the conservatives, the Whigs were the liberals. Even in America, that's why we use terms, what's a Tory in America? Let's say around 1776. Loyalists to what? Yeah, the Tories were the ones that wanted conservative policies, which is strong deference to the crown, parliamentary superiority. All colonies are pretty much to follow what the British government tells them to do. The Whigs, or we hope in God, or the liberals, over in America, that's where you got people like Jefferson, John Hancock, Samuel Adams, all sound kind of familiar. Liberals, like William Pitt over in England, these were people who thought, well, we should let the colonists have some autonomy. They should have more representation. They should get some more votes. We should try and keep the crown from having too much power. And so you had battles. That's what the liberal and conservative arguments were. Liberals wanted free markets. Conservatives wanted government control over free markets. Mercantilism. Heavy taxes on trade. That was the liberal-conservative debate of its time. And so many of these American Political Science Association people were saying, our politics need to be kind of like those old British politics. Isn't that ironic? That's what the recommendation would be. Now, elitists think that it's a little more complicated. Do y'all see this graphic over here? I'm going to explain this graphic to you because it may not be self-evident. Or can you figure it out? Take a look over it. What happens is parties don't offer clear stands on the issues. This is not because they're mean or bad. This is just what we would call smart politics. You have strong incentives not to offer clear choices. You have strong incentives to have a lot of wiggle room. You have strong incentives to have elites do what they will. It's kind of like if you're watching a game and one guy does a little bit of pass interference, or you're playing a soccer game or so and somebody's just a little bit offsides and they can get away with it. And you think, okay, well we can do this again a little. So you stay really close to offsides because you can probably get away with it. Do you ever have games like that? You know, somebody elbows you a little harder and the refs don't call it, and you're like, oh, it's going to be one of those games.
Maybe last night in the Denver game when they called 1,500 million pass interference.
Yeah, there were a lot of. I was watching that because I had two Denver players on my fantasy team, and my opponent here from LaGrange, who works for West Georgia Health, he had one Denver person. So I had Emmanuel Sanders, he had Demaryius Thomas. So every time somebody threw the ball, I'm like, oh crap. Let's hope the right person gets it.
I have the Denver defense on my fantasy team.
Ooh, not so good. I should not have left Latavius Murray on the bench. He kind of went to Marshawn Lynch. Anyway, all that aside. But, you get to realize that sometimes, it's true in baseball too. They'll call some things and not others. They'll be like on the line. Sometimes you get flagged for holding just for touching the other person. Other times you can pick them up and throw them offside, out of bounds, and whatever. Right? And what happens is elites will say, well, there's strong reasons not to have any issuettes. Now, be honest with me. How many of y'all watched any of the NFL games? Or are you doing that boycott NFL thing? Like that? The boycott NFL, or did you watch any football games this weekend? Did you watch any TV this weekend? Tons of ads, were there not? Lots of Hillary Clinton ads, lots of Donald Trump ads. This is actually, since I have moved here, This is the most amount of ads I have ever seen. And trust me, I look for these things. Most of y'all are like, oh great, time to go to the bathroom, or time to get another non-alcoholic drink. Time to get more chips, time to get queso, right? Whereas I'm like, no, I'm gonna watch these ads. Anybody get to see any ads this weekend? They ran ads all the time in the NFL game. Which I thought Trump was boycotting the NFL. Oh well. Maybe not for ads. He can say, well, I didn't go to any game. But nevertheless, they were saturated with ads. Anybody see any ads this weekend?
I've seen some, but not this weekend. I haven't watched TV.
Are they pretty much issue-based? Where they focus on policy positions?
No.
Hell no! No, they're like attacking each other. What are they about? What ads have you seen this campaign season?
Both of them say they're unfit to serve.
Yeah! One focuses on emails. I like that one where they have somebody dressed like Hillary Clinton, like destroying cell phones and stuff. I would have had Tom Brady like whispering in her going like, okay, here's what you do to cell phone. Oh, come on, folks. I thought that one was fun.
Hillary's got a bunch of children watching Donald Trump on TV, making fun of people.
A lot of negative ads, but not necessarily like, oh, we can't have Donald Trump's position on immigration, or Hillary's position on China is dangerous. And explain why. No, they don't do anything like that. These are all non-issue ads. They're all about character. They're all about personality. And this is why. Because according to a normal distribution model, a normal distribution model comes from math. This is what a normal distribution model looks like. It comes from the sciences. Like I told you, political science is an interdisciplinary discipline. Now I sound like Austin Powers. I allow myself to introduce myself. Okay. It's an interdisciplinary field. Borrows from a lot of different ideas. And so, in order to win, you've got to appeal to the most voters possible. Normal distribution model assumes that most voters are here. This, y'all know, this is 34.13%. Does that make sense? This says 13.59%. This is how to read it. 2.15%. You got that? It's on both sides. The variable here is number of voters. The variable over here is ideology. Keep in mind, this is a theory. We'll actually see what it is, whether this is true or not. 0 would be like the most moderate person around. Me. Seriously, I get centrist on all my ideology scores. I took that implicit bias test and it says I have no subconscious biases between Clinton and Trump, which I didn't believe. I actually thought I had bias. I really did. I got a bumper sticker for both parties. I got a bag full of Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Bernie Sanders. I got all that. My favorite flavor is vanilla. Okay, that's me. I'm 0. I'm like ground 0. I'm like right in the middle. This would be moderate. Out here toward +3 is conservative. Toward -3 is liberal. Now if you're liberal, you're like, oh, you're dissing me, you're calling me -3. Numbers, it's not like -3 is bad and +3 is good. It's like this, I did this because this is like toward the right, this is toward the left. Makes sense, left wing, right wing. I'm not taking sides here, not dissing you liberals. Got that? So, where are most of the voters? Liberal, moderate, or conservative?
Moderate.
Yeah, they're mostly moderate. They're mostly in the middle. We've got a lot of kind of people who are slightly leaning liberal, people slightly leaning conservative. Harrison, what percentage of moderates do we have? If we said all moderates, barely leaning Republican, barely leaning Democrat, or barely leaning liberal, barely leaning.
According to that in total?
Yeah, according to that. If we have a normal distribution model.
You'd have 68% then.
Yeah, so 2/3 of all voters, a little bit more than 2/3, are in the middle. How about the really, really hardcore liberals? What do we got there? Super hardcore. They're like super loyalist. They're going to the victory party in Atlanta tonight. Or tomorrow night. That would be funny for me. Same thing with the conservatives. They're driving down to Tampa today to see Mike Pence. Wait, no, he's not in Tampa. He's in Panama City. Okay.
Sarasota today.
Oh, is he Sarasota today? Sarasota's a nice town. Right? Those are the people going down, like they're going to the campaign events. They've got signs in their yards. They're making phone calls over the weekend to try and get out the vote. It's about 2% on both sides, right? Some total of 4%. And then these are the folks who, they vote every single time Democrat, they vote every single time Republican. They might put a bumper sticker on their car. They might wear a button for a few days, but they're loyalists, but not like those others. They're not like super loyalists. They might show up to a rally or so, if it's nearby. Make sense? So, if you're running for office, Betsy, how you gonna get the most voters? How are you going to run? Are you going to run hardcore left, hardcore right, somewhere in the middle? But you're not in the middle, are you? Personally. No, you may not be in the middle. But if you want to win, you'll be in the middle, right? So, what happens is most people craft their strategy to appeal to the most voters, regardless of position. They kind of, you'll say negative things about the other side. You'll kind of be like me. You'll take a lot of boring vanilla policies, right? You'll say stuff that's like accommodates all sides. I remember George W. Bush was running, and somebody said, well, what about this policy about saving the salmon? Because you got the people who fish for salmon, they want to keep those going, but they're worried about damming up the river, and then you got people who want to dam up the river for hydroelectric power. And Bush is like, well, we'll do both. We'll save the salmon and have a dam. Yeah, that's what people did. Bill Clinton, after years of hardcore liberals, he adopted a very centrist position. That was something Democrats hadn't seen in a long time. He was like the most moderate Democrat we had in years. Candidates do this kind of thing. They like the middle. If you're too hardcore, who are you going to appeal to?
Only a small portion of voters.
Yeah, you ever heard this guy named Barry Goldwater? Now, Barry Goldwater, he wanted to appeal to a lot of very strong Republican conservatives. His party took over his faction took over the party in 1964. They outflanked a very liberal Republican governor named Nelson Rockefeller. And that last name Rockefeller sounds like there's a lot of money. Yeah, the guy was loaded and had lots of money and was governor of New York. But Barry Goldwater appealed to the hardcore conservatives and was able to outflank him in the primaries. George McGovern did the same thing 8 years later. He appealed to the most hardcore progressive liberals you could find. And the moderates all got jumbled up together in the primaries, and so he won. Now, both gentlemen got hammered in the general election. They only won a few states. It wasn't even close. I think both President Nixon, who defeated McGovern, and LBJ, President Lyndon Baines Johnson, I think they each got like 60% of the vote, the popular vote. They won about 90%, 95% of the states. They were blowout elections. Now, speaking of Richard Nixon, this is something to really, really, really follow. Richard Nixon. Yeah, you say what you want. Yeah, okay, well, he wasn't impeached, but he resigned before he could be impeached. Yeah, he probably would have been removed from office if he had tried to stick around. He knew when to get out. But Richard Nixon was a very smart guy. He had barely lost the election in 1960. Then he decided to run for Republican governor to bring back his career, and he lost that too. Everyone's like, whoa, what a loser. I mean, I think they invented this for Richard Nixon. This symbol, you ever seen this? This was probably made for Richard Nixon. It did not stand for liberal. You got that? So in 1968, he wanted to run again, and everybody just laughed. What a fool. He'll never win. Everyone knew that the next president of the United States would be George Romney. Ooh, does that name sound familiar? George Romney just looked like a president. He was governor of Michigan, a Democrat state, but he was a Republican. Very moderate, so he could appeal to Democrats and Republicans. He was the CEO of American Motors, a business success story. A Republican governor who had won and governed effectively in a Democratic state. He won re-election overwhelmingly. George Romney was going to be the next president of the United States in 1968. All he had to do was beat a two-time loser, Richard Nixon. You see, Nixon learned something from Barry Goldwater. He realized that, Nixon himself was kind of a moderate guy. But he realized that Barry Goldwater won because not everyone shows up to a primary. Most people start tuning into the election around October. Not like all of you. I know you're all like taking a political science class. You might be majors, hopefully. You followed this election for a year or more. Most people kind of tune in around election time, but he knew that the primaries were pretty important, conventions, and he knew that Goldwater won in a huge upset by being the most conservative person out there to reach the party faithful. So this is what he did. Instead of being where he normally was policy-wise, he was kind of around here, maybe. He decided to go hardcore right-wing. Outflanked George Romney and beat him in a huge upset. But see, he was smart enough to realize that if he just stayed there, it wouldn't have worked. And it was good. And George Romney made a lot of mistakes. Some were pretty funny. Like he was like at a state fair. He would give all these interviews. They got really tired at the end of the day, and somebody was interviewing him. And he'd gone over to Vietnam because the Vietnam War was going on. And somebody asked him, "Hey, how was that trip on the Vietnam War?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, I went over to Vietnam, and we got a real brainwashing over there." You don't want to hear the leader of the free world has been brainwashed over in Vietnam. That was like, I don't know what the hell he was thinking, but he said he started making all kinds of mistakes. He didn't expect this Nixon guy to cause him problems. There's a great scene in a movie called The Making of the President, 1968. Anybody here a basketball fan? He was over at a high school gym, and because he was also a tall guy, he was like 6'6", and he kept like trying to shoot and make baskets. It was going on for like an hour, and he just kept shooting. All right, unless you're Michael Jordan, don't try and do that. Very few people can just, it's not like Hollywood where you just chuck a ball and it goes in, right? It worked in Space Jam, but not for George Romney. He was like, for like an hour, finally his aides are like, okay, stop. No, I can make this finally. Everybody's going, oh crap. Made all kinds of stumbles, mistakes, and moreover, the people he was appealing to over here stayed home on primary day. The hardcore folks showed up in Nixon in a major upset. Nobody saw it coming. But remember what I told you about Barry Goldwater got hammered for being over here. So once Nixon had won the primary, he shifted to the middle. Democrats nominated somebody over here, Hubert Humphrey. There was a lot of chaos. Martin Luther King was assassinated April 4th. It's my sister-in-law's birthday, so that's why I remember it. Bobby Kennedy, who probably would have won the 1968 election, was assassinated in June after winning the California primary. Bobby Kennedy would have been over like here. He would have given Nixon a good fight. George Wallace showed up. This guy was like an ultra-conservative. And so Nixon kind of pushed himself into the middle. Nixon appealed to this crowd. And he won in 1968 and 1972. What you do, the Nixon primary rule is, you run to your hardcore base for the primaries. Then you start moving to the middle. Anybody into sailing? You ever gone sailing? Anybody? Sailing's kind of neat. They call it tacking. You tack to the left, you tack to the right. You ever have to go tacking? You ever had to? Or did you just like turn on the motor and go?
I'm taking sailing class, so like.
Oh, you're taking sailing.
Yeah.
Have you done any tacking so far?
Yeah, I'm controlling the boat, so like when the wind comes, I have to go when the wind's going.
Yeah. Excellent. You got to go with the wind. Wherever the political winds are blowing, there you go. So you're tacking back and forth while you're waiting for a full breeze to go. Then once you get on the lake and the breeze is behind your back, you're just racing off. It's like being on a roller coaster. Awesome feeling. I love it. It's been a long time since I've been. Does that make sense? So you start off by going to your base. You play to the base, and then you go moderate. Does that sound like something we've seen in this 2016 election? On the Republican side, on the Democrat side. Go ahead. What have you seen? What have you observed? I trust that y'all are smart people. What's the word on the street? What have you noticed?
You could say that Bernie Sanders almost outshot the base.
Bernie Sanders was over here. In fact, he's probably this little pixel over here. Hillary Clinton is normally over here.
And honestly, I feel like she didn't get much further from there. Maybe a little bit more.
She kind of tried to, she had to move more over here than she probably would have liked. The Clintons like camping out over here. They're like camping in the middle. And there was like all this she gave a speech where she told the people on Wall Street one thing and she said another thing to Democratic voter base.
Abraham Lincoln. Yeah.
Hillary Clinton is actually, if you think about it, well, this should tell you everything. In 1964, when she was high school, college, she was a supporter of Barry Goldwater.
Right.
And she's kind of a moderate to conservative person. But if you're going to win the Democrat stuff, so she had to go, most people thought Bernie Sanders was going to be a joke. So she started off here. Bernie Sanders gave her a much tougher fight because he was camped out over here. So she had to move to the left more than she would have liked. How about on the Republican side? Any Republicans? What the hell happened to your party? That's not meant as a quick count, but just what the hell happened?
I don't know how to.
Oh, hell, let's just say hell.
I'm not qualified to talk about that.
What happened? Come on. How did Donald Trump win? The guy's never even held office for a day in his life. How could he win the nomination?
I would say that he appealed to all the way over, but we'll have to wait, really, to see.
He supported the assault weapons ban under Bill Clinton. I mean, the guy's like half Democrat when he came into the office. What did he do?
He just wasn't afraid of saying what's in his mind.
Okay, definitely. That's the case, yeah. Did you see where his campaign ads are trying to block him from getting on Twitter over the last 2 days?
Sometimes he contradicts. Like one day he'll say something, the next couple months he'll say something else.
Well, he moves around a lot. But in terms of this primary, what did he do? I mean, everyone knew he wasn't going to win. It was going to be Jeb Bush.
You would say that he appealed to, the poor, but I don't know if he really did, and I don't think we'll know until how far I don't know.
I think he appealed to, one thing I think he did is he appealed not just to Republican conservatives, he appealed to independent conservatives who normally don't like either party. So he brought people in on the Republican side, which is probably why it's his closest. This is just my guess. But I mean, he took stands that a lot of other people wouldn't take in the Republican Party. I mean, you had people like Marco Rubio, John Kasich, Jeb Bush. They're all here in the moderate side of the party. And over here, you got Ted Cruz. Donald Trump, didn't he kind of go off this way? Yeah, you're right. And so he moves around a lot. But see, Nixon would be okay with that because that's what you're supposed to do. Okay, so Hillary Clinton was more liberal in the spring, more moderate in the summer and fall, but that's what you're supposed to do according to the Nixon primary rule. Don't take a stand. You gotta move around, be a moving target. Harder to get you. Because the number of people who are hardcore, it's like 16% on both sides. They'll show up in the primary time, but it's not enough to win on election day. Ever heard this term before? Oligarchy? Ever heard of oligarchy? You ever heard this? What does oligarchy mean? It's one of those Ever heard that before? College football is kind of like an oligarchy.
Isn't it like when power is in the hands of a few?
Perfect. Power in the hands of a few. It's dominated by a strong elite. Ask Bernie Sanders. Don't they have some of these WikiLeaks show up to say that everyone realized, oh my gosh, this guy's way too liberal to us. He's not going to win. He's partially socialist. Find ways to undermine him. Right? And there's some Republican moderates who are voting for Hillary Clinton this election cycle. They're called the establishment, the elite. They don't like Donald Trump too much. Kind of a loose cannon. So some of these establishment types, I got contacted by a conservative outfit to write an article about the Bush family. Just about everybody in the Bush family is either voting for Hillary Clinton or saying not to vote for Trump. That's like the Bush family. That's like a dynasty. Yeah, that's where you get terms called the establishment. That's a good name for the oligarchy. Ruled by a few. They dominate the process. They control the elections. They can't control voters, but they can control a lot of things. Get the outcome that they want. That's what the establishment is. It comes out of elite theory. Now, pluralists would say that the establishment's mostly a myth. It's mostly in the hands of voters. You've got some party leaders, but we have a weak party system. Party can't control a lot of things. Otherwise, like Bernie Sanders would be wearing concrete shoes at the bottom of Hudson River. This ain't Russia, folks. But elitist theory will say a couple party people really try. And occasionally you get some anti-establishment person like Ted Cruz out there. I don't know if you know this, but one of the wealthiest members of Congress, he's a Texas congressman, has already announced he's most likely going to challenge Ted Cruz. It's going to be establishment versus conservative. Even in this congressional district, there were arguments about who was the establishment candidate, the favorite of the party faithful, versus the outsider candidate. Did y'all follow that?
So, what would be?
I brought the outsider in and one of the actually two of the establishment.
So was Senator, or was Crane, so Crane was an outsider?
Oh, you bet.
Okay.
That's why Ted Cruz, I met Ted Cruz at his fundraiser in Noonan. Yeah, they're kind of on the outside of the party. They're the party irregulars. And then you have the party insiders. They're like, they're closer to the party base. They're more moderate, more electable. If that makes sense. Now, in a number of cases, we're seeing something. This is a trend. And by the way, we are going to be testing all of these on election day. So don't skip on, or I should say day after election. That's when all the polls will come back, exit polls. And we can get some idea. We can get some idea about how the party, some of these ideas, the responsible party model, the normal distribution model, de-alignment, we can test all of these the day after the election. So make sure you're here because we're gonna do lab work on that day. De-alignment means people are leaving traditional parties. This is from the 2004 election. We're going to look at the same data for 2016. What do you notice? First off, how are most people? Democrat, Republican, or Independent?
It's like a perfect split.
Yeah. You're right. It is. It's like a little more than a third are Democrat, a little more than a third are Republican. You've got a little more than a quarter are actually voting, but they're not members of either party. That's de-alignment at work. We can check to see what the percentage is in 2016. Right? We can see what people report in the exit polls. There'll be millions of people participating. What do you notice also? Okay, so we got about a third, a little more than a third are Democrat, third are Republican, more than a third Independent. What do we notice about their choices? Can y'all see the percentages? I need y'all to sit in the front row. This ain't church, folks. You don't hide in the back. Oh, what a hypocrite. I always sit in the back of church. It's because we had kids and you're used to it. Like sometimes when they're babies, they're worried about them screaming. When they're younger, they have to go to the bathroom or something. So now they're old enough, or just habit. But what do you notice? What do you notice about those party faithful, those Democrats and those Republicans? Are they backing their candidate? Republicans, are they all voting for Bush? Are the Democrats all voting for Massachusetts Senator Kerry? What's happening? These are people who are like, what are you, Democrat, Republican, or Independent? These are people who identify themselves. But what are they doing? Go ahead, sing it out. What you got? What do the numbers show? Did y'all see it on your laptops?
It seems like they're backing their candidates.
Yeah, they generally are. About 89% of Democrats supported John Kerry. Right now you're all like, what? It's not 100%? You call yourself a Democrat and you're voting for someone other than John Kerry? What's it for the Republicans? of them voted for George W. Bush, right? No. About 7% voted for John Kerry. Do you see how this works? So what the argument is that we're going in de-alignment. Not only do we have a quarter of all voters refuse to pick a party, but we're also seeing about 10% of each party is defecting or going to the other side. This is Democrats for George W. Bush, Republicans for John Kerry. Do you understand de-alignment now? So I'm sure George W. Bush, if he votes for Hillary Clinton, he's not changing his political party affiliation. He's not suddenly going to be a Democrat. Jeb Bush suddenly isn't going to be a Democrat. Sometimes people switch sides, right? You can still be a Republican and vote for Clinton. You can still be a Democrat and vote for Trump, correct? It'll be interesting. We can tell day after the election. I mean, unless there's like martial law or like riots break out or there's some EMP is set off by ISIS people. If that doesn't happen, show up at 11:30 and let's see what the heck happens. Do we have de-alignment? We can test this hypothesis of a theory that Americans are increasingly abandoning traditional party labels. We can actually go to the site. And that's what we'll do. It'll be lab day. So you don't have to bring a lab coat or those like gloves. But bring your laptops. How's that sound? Okay, a little bit before we get there. A lot of people are like, how did we get Trump and Clinton? How did we get Gary Johnson from the Libertarians? By the way, have you all seen that Gary Johnson video where he's at a panel that's a discussion on marijuana? Have you all seen that?
She mentions that marijuana leads to more heart disease.
Okay, so type in Gary Johnson, go to YouTube. Not now, after class. Go to YouTube, type in Gary Johnson marijuana on YouTube. Watch it after class. Totally worth it. Share it with your friends. Post it on Facebook. My kids are still cracking up about that. My son actually, but a lot of people ask, how do we get the candidates we got? Here's how we did. Believe it or not, in the old days, we had party bosses pick the candidates, closed nominating systems. They even called these things smoke-filled rooms because people would be in a back room with a big old stogie, all these cigars. I used to smoke cigars in college, so I can't criticize. And they would just puff away, and they would say, it'll be Warren G. Harding. Seriously, that's how they would do it. Why Warren G. Harding? Well, he's good looking, so that'll obviously win him the women vote on the first election that women get to vote in. Seriously, people thought that. And secondly, Warren G. Harding has brain cells that can be measured in single digits. So, I mean, he's easy to control. That's what party bosses would do this. They would pick who they thought they could control. He's good looking, or he's a war hero, or he's, well, most importantly, he's someone we can control. All right, when we get back, we'll talk a little bit about the nominating system and how people got picked. The role that voters now play. We don't have smoke-filled rooms anymore. Anyway, I'll see y'all later. Sydney and Brecken, did y'all get my email? So I'm going to need so research was we'll leave on Thursday, so I'll send you out the schedule to see what kind of work you have to do. Do you need any email to so I can do this and say, hey,
Yes.
Do I get copy of everything?
If you want to drive separately, that would be fine. I would have to build in a little extra for gasoline, but if you're not going to be with us on Thursday, I think it wouldn't work that much. So I won't be able to be there with the card
Oh, no,
to pull it out, but can you?
pay for my gas.
Yeah, but no, well, you're not going to pay, we'll reimburse you. Make sure you keep every single receipt. Like, in addition, like, I would even like save the receipt, but like take a photo of it. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay, because I'm going to start doing that now, because I've also received for when we went up to the well, and I got paid for that on my